Is there a way to short a particular player or sports card? Meaning, can you sell a player that you think is going to tank and be able to profit from it? This is an interesting question. You can obviously do this in the stock market, but is there a way to do it in sports cards? And if there was, would you participate? I think I actually would, because I think modern cards provide a great opportunity to bet against specific players and against specific cards. So the only way you can short a card right now is literally pull it from a pack and sell it immediately because you don't think it's going to rise in value. That's not really shorting. You're not really profiting from it. The profit's actually coming from the surprise and pulling the card out of the pack. But I'm talking about an exchange between 2 or 3 people and finding a way to short something and profit from that exchange. So before I talk about how this could work in sports cards, let me explain shorting in general like I would to a 5-year-old. So imagine you have a friend who really wants to sell their toy car. They think the car is worth $50, but you don't agree. You think it's worth $5. So instead of buying the car, you borrow it from your friend. You say, all right, I'm going to bring this back to you in like 3 months. Don't worry. Just let me borrow it for a while. So then you find another buyer that's willing to buy it for $50 and you sell it immediately. And then later you watch the prices of this toy car and the toy car goes down to $5. Then you buy it back. So you got that $50. You buy it back for $5. You now have $45 because you timed that toy car market perfectly. So you go back to your friend, you give him the car, you keep the $45, everybody's happy. That is what shorting is. People do it all the time in stocks and other securities. An example of how this would work with a sports card is our buddy Mac Jones. I'm a Pats fan, so I got to pick on Mac Jones. He had a card worth $100,000. So it sold for $100,000. And let's just say you go to that buyer, you borrow it, and you come up with some terms, whether it's collateral or an interest rate, and you shop the card. You find another buyer for $100,000, you sell it immediately. And let's just say you know the trainer or you know the coach, you're buddies with Bill Belichick, you know he's going to get demoted and then eventually traded. And you wait until it reaches $50K. You buy the card back, give it to your friend, you keep the $50K, your friend gets the card back. And that is a perfect short transaction. But here are the main problems with sports cards. There's 6 of them that we have to fix. And I'm going to give you a way that this could work and that I might test. Problem number 1, there's no established loan rates for cards. You'd have to come up with something a bit higher than the prime rate and the interest rate. I don't know what that would be. It would have to be pretty lucrative to work in the hobby, maybe even as high as 10%. Number 2, when you borrowed this from your friend, there was no credit check. There was no collateral. You really need to make sure both of those are in place like they do with stocks. The third and most important, there's no third-party institution like Vanguard or BlackRock or somebody backing this transaction up. So if something goes south, it's an instant lawsuit, you know. Number 4, there's no contract or defined period of time. And what's to stop the friend from just calling the police and getting his card back? You know, there isn't like a mechanism for this. And the last and also very important one is stocks have indexes to determine a relatively exact value. It's a very liquid market, buying and selling all the time. Cards are a lot more difficult, especially one-of-ones. There's markets, but they're not perfect. There's shill bidding, so you know eBay's not perfect. 130 point is okay, but just all the private sales aren't getting factored in. So these are the problems with shorting sports cards, but I think they're actually fixable. So what would a successful shorting mechanism look like in the hobby? So number 1, we have an established loan rate. You base this on the interest rate and the prime rate and the risk involved with the card. So I think the higher the card, the higher the rate. You also want to do this by period of time, just like they do in shorting. If you're shorting for a month, that's a different rate than if you're shorting for a year or 2 years. People do this with mortgages all the time to game it. Number 2, you do a credit check. You have collateral, a certain percentage of the card's worth, whatever the standard is by, you know, banks have this underwriting standard. You just find the standard and stick with that. Number 3, you involve a third-party institution or fiduciary to hold the borrower liable for the funds. That gets a bit tricky. You're going to need to involve a bank or some other legal institution to have this money in an escrow in a way. But then you use the money, and then based on that escrow, you have a contract and you can default on that contract and you deal with that bank. So the bank's going to be taking on a lot of risk here. But if the market was big enough, they might be into it. Number 4, you have a defined contract. So I am going to borrow this for 1 month, 6 months, 2 years. The longer the contract, the higher the rate you need to pay, which is interesting. I think of all the people sitting on these cards in the hobby and they're just collecting dust in safes. What if they could actually get some action on these cards? You know, you lend that card out, he's paying you 10% interest on that card. You know, you're going to get it back as long as it's guaranteed by a financial institution. And that might not be a bad way to make money on the card, especially if you also think it's going to go down in value. It's a very interesting play here. And then I think the other really important thing would be an agreed index to use for card values before the deal is struck. So you're going to say something like, now for a 1 of 1, this is very hard, but for a non 1 of 1, like a rookie patch auto, there are comps. And so you say, we are going to look at eBay, 130 point, and all 5 of these auction houses on, you know, the first Saturday of the month, the last Saturday of the month. And we're going to do that for 6 months. We're going to take the average and we agree on that average as the index. Or you just come up with a way. If there's private sales, then, you know, maybe it's a poll of everybody who owns those cards and you agree to abide by that poll plus or minus 10% or something like that. So this is how I would do it. I don't think this would take a ton of capital. You just need to get a bank or financial institution involved. And this could be interesting for the hobby. The way I think about this is, especially in football, everybody's gambling on quarterbacks all the time. Like, who's the next Brady? Who's the next Manning? Who's going to win a championship? And it would be really fun to bet against these players. Me, personally, I'm a pessimist with modern cards, and I would love to bet against all of this. I would short the crap out of so much stuff, but there's just no mechanism to do it. Like I said, other than pulling the card yourself and just selling it immediately. That's kind of the only proxy for it. So this could be interesting. I might actually experiment with a one-off card in a private marketplace with a deal in place with a notary and all of that, and just agree to buy something ridiculous, like some stupid quarterback card with somebody they think is going to pop this year, and then, you know, bet against that card. We'll see. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. You know, is there a place for short selling in the hobby? Is this something that can exist with enough rigor behind it? Let me know, because I think this is something we are missing, especially with modern cards.